he has spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J. Loren Norris.
When I was in sales, we had a phrase that was a little graphic, but it was very, very indicative of some salespeople. We would call it the product vomit. The product vomit. It's when someone would come into a sales opportunity, maybe it was an actual meeting, maybe it was just running into a customer on the street, and the first thing out of their mouth was just the list of all the products and services that they had to offer. It was just like diarrhea of the mouth. They would just dump on the person that they were talking to all kinds of words and facts and features, benefits, and availabilities all over somebody. And usually it left the person on the other side feeling kind of taken aback, maybe even just a little bit abused, taken advantage of. See, the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that it's the narrative that really drives the direction, that points out the priorities. It's the stories that we choose to tell that create the narrative. But it's the leader who chooses the stories. If all you do is product dump the volume of things that you know about your product on people, your priority is the sale. It's not helping the person. You haven't asked enough questions yet to know that. Well, how those stories are chosen is a big deal. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I'm J. Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And I know you know this, but I want to really bring it down to brass tacks for you. When it comes to the stories that lead the narrative, those stories are chosen very selectively and very intentionally. And you may not think that that's true because it seems like everything is out there in this information age that we live in, that every bit of information, every bit of knowledge, every incident that's happening, we're just being bombarded with it 24/7. And so it's really harder for us as information consumers to decide what to listen to and what to find to be true. Well, that's not entirely the case. And in fact, there's sufficient, maybe even significant evidence to the fact that the stories that we hear in media, in social media, in everyday conversation are stories that are very specifically chosen to be heard. For every bill that goes to Congress to be voted on, someone decides which part of that bill is put in front of the people who have to vote on it and when. And someone decides which committee gets to review that bill and whether or not the people on that committee will be technically qualified to consider the content within the bill or not. Whether it's going to make some people multimillionaires in a matter of months or make other people broke or enslaved, really not up to the voters anymore. It's up to the people who handle the bill. They decide what gets passed, what gets into the committee, what gets decided on, and then, as you've heard many times, you've got to vote to pass the bill before you can read what's in it. Well, that's controlling the story. Nobody knows what's in a 4,300-page bill until they've read it. By the way, In case you're curious, 4,300 seems like such an abstract number. Do you remember the last time you had to fill the copier or the laser printer with paper? That almost 2-inch thick stack of paper that comes in the little wrapper and you have to take it all out and stuff it in the machine. Do you know how many pages that is? That's 500. So 4,300 is almost 9 of those. 9. A case of paper, which most people would prefer to move on a dolly than to carry around by hand. That entire case of paper is 5,000 sheets of paper. Yeah, we're talking about a lot of pages for a $4,300 or 4,300 page bill to be passed. When you can control who gets to read that or decide on that before anybody else gets to know what it really will impact and what's included and not included, then you really do control the narrative, because you control the stories that can be told about 4,000 pages of something that nobody's ever read. Let me add to that, the editor of the newspaper, the magazine, the newsletter, whether it's digital or in print, that editor decides, regardless who the journalist is, whether the story they've written makes it to print. They don't have to print it. If the editor says, I don't like your story, I don't like your headline, I don't like your premise, I don't like the fact that you're talking about blue gorillas or pink bubblegum. In fact, all stories about pink bubblegum are no longer allowed. Do not submit to me as the editor of this publication another story about pink bubblegum. It will never see the light of day. Well, that seems like a bit of a stretch, but no, that's literally how it works. And so the editor of that publication really holds in their fingers the key to determining the priorities. See, it's the narrative that determines the priorities. What's most important to you today? How will you make decisions about your finances, about your family, about your freedom? The decisions that you will make in your business today will be driven by the narrative, which is controlled by the leader who determines what stories you hear. Oh, it happens in news production. The news crew goes out with the video camera. They point it at the incident that's going on. The camera person steps up there, grabs their microphone, gives their spiel, their viewpoint of what they're seeing in the moment. Maybe they have an unbiased lens. Maybe they kind of got their own way of seeing things, and that's what they put in the story. But whether that story ever makes it to air or not, there's a gatekeeper that determines that. What's in that story? What gets edited out of that story? You can imagine, because I do this podcast live every day, how much editing I've had to do. Now, I will tell you this. Aside from a coughing spell that I can't overcome, or a dog running in, or a light falling over, all of those things have happened. Even my mics have just randomly turned off for no reason. All of those things have happened in the course of a show. But for the most part, what you see live is what gets saved and published. What you see live right here on Leading Leaders Podcast is what gets saved and what gets published in every platform that I publish in. All of the broadcast networks that carry what I do, all of the online platforms that carry what I do, Spotify, Apple, Google, all of those, they get what you see live right here. 99% of the time, there's nothing cut out. Now, you have to ask yourself, if the stories that I'm telling behind this microphone in front of this camera resonate with you. Have I chosen stories that build up together to a larger narrative that you can look at and say, I like what he has to say, I can make decisions based on that. See, you've chosen to prioritize the narrative that I'm bringing forward. How do I know that? Well, because if you're not watching this show, you didn't just hear me say that. If you are watching this, then you've heard me say that. And you've heard me talk about other stories and other narratives over and over again. This is the 8th year. The today 1390th episode of Leading Leaders Podcast. I've said a few things. I've made some points. I've pointed out other people's ideologies and errors and truths along the way. I've even had some guests on the show. Maybe we'll do that again. But the point still remains that those who control the story that goes forward, they control the narrative. And those who control the narrative, they control the priorities, because the narrative determines the priorities. In case you're wondering if there's really truth to that, it's not hard to look at the media or the social media and say what stories have been most important, what stories have been pushed to the front, what stories have been prioritized. We've all heard the phrase algorithm. Algorithm is the artificial intelligence. Maybe the focus should be on artificial rather than intelligence. But it's the artificial intelligence ability to look at a story and ask the question, who's paying attention to it? If this story was important to them, if they like story A, then let's skip B, C, E, D, F, G, and L, and let's go all the way down to R, Q, and S. Those stories should follow A, because the priorities of those stories are the same. Or the fact that they've watched A tells us something about them that we need to counter that. We need to find some opposing truth, some other side of the road. I know in my newsfeed on various social media platforms, if I just start watching a video, whether it's a shorts or it's a longer video, and I just let it play, and I do this on a regular basis just for the fun of it. I'll just let the video play. I don't move the device. I don't pick it up. I don't look at the screen. I set it off on the other side of the room, put it on the room sound system, and I let it play. And it's ironic to me sometimes where the video stream goes after the one that I'm watching. If it's about politics, it will go in 2 or 3 different ways. Different people, different ideologies, different worldviews, different presentations. Sometimes there'll be an auto follow because the person who created the video actually chooses the next video in their timeline or in their string to be the next video. But oftentimes that's not the case. The video comes to an end and the next thing that plays is the most random thing you can imagine. Or so it would seem. No, it's not. It's a chosen story. Why? Because those who choose the stories lead the narrative. And those who lead the narrative determine the priorities. If you're not sure about the priorities in your life, if you haven't hammered down on your own core values, what will happen to you is that you will get the input from so many other people, stories bombarding your mind and your imagination, telling you what's true, telling you what's going on, telling you what's real. And at some point, your imagination is going to begin to look like the gas lines of the 1970s. Remember, we ran out of oil in 1973. Oh, that's how we got the Ford Pinto and that tiny little thing they called a Mustang. Yeah, we went away from the big cars and went to the tiny little cars, and we went from 70-mile-an-hour highway speed limits to 55 highway speed limits, and all of these other means of controlling the petroleum because we were going to run out before the end of 1975. It's 50 years ago. We haven't run out of oil. In fact, we've bottlenecked the flow of oil. We've controlled who gets wealthy from oil. We've shifted the priorities of oil. We've come up with new ways to make cars go besides oil, but we haven't run out. Now the story isn't we're going to run out of oil, it's the damage the oil is doing to the earth. But we're still trying to get away from oil. Fascinating to me that the story has changed, so the narrative can change, but the priority still remains the same. Get rid of the oil. They realized the story they were telling wasn't working. The narrative wasn't taking hold. People behaved that way for a certain period of time, and then they stopped. And they went back to their old ways, and they lost control. So they changed the story. But the story still fits a narrative, and a narrative still has priorities. And the people who lead you are choosing the story. What if we turn that on its head, though? What if you chose the stories that you tell? What if you had the chance to talk about what was going on in your world and in your life? Now let me ask you this. I don't mean this to be a trick question, but I do mean it to be an honest evaluation of yourself. If I met you on the streets with a camera on my shoulder and a microphone in my hand and I said, tell me the story that you believe the world needs to know. Give me the story that feeds the narrative that will change the priorities as you see them needing to be changed. Are you ready for that? Do you know what story you would tell in that moment? Here's what I find to be true. Many people over the years that I've owned a DJ and AV company want to sing karaoke until they see somebody else get on the stage who has a natural talent for it and has been practicing in the shower for decades. That person jumps up there and they sing and they sound exactly like the original artist. And all of a sudden people go, yeah, I thought I was a singer, but no, I don't want to sing today. It happens as I do Story Power Masterclass workshops and people come in and someone gets up and tells a story and they're like, wow, they're really good. I don't want to do this. I'm like, no, you signed up for the class. Everybody's going to tell a story. Everybody in the class will tell a story. Before you leave here, everyone in this class will tell a story. And if possible, they'll tell it twice or they'll tell another one. Why? Because the world needs to hear your story. And I'm going to put a camera in your face, and I'm going to put a mic in your face, and I'm going to challenge you to tell a story. Because those who choose the stories build the narrative. And those who build the narrative determine the priorities in our society. And if you are silent about your story, you have no input in our priorities. Oh, you can vote. You can show up with the places that you vote with your money, and you can decide whether you will support a type of business or not a type of business, whether you will give to a candidate or not give to a candidate, support a religious ideology or not support a nonprofit or not support. You get to vote with your money in that way. But every day, the people that you work with, the people that you lead, the people that you influence, they will either hear your story or they will hear your silence. And the stories that you choose not to tell, they also drive a narrative. And they reveal priorities. Usually, someone else's. I want to challenge you in 2023 to step up, to speak up, to share your voice, to share your story. Don't be silent anymore. But also remember, there's an art form to sharing stories, to selecting which story to tell. I don't want you to be the salesperson who product vomits and just tells everything that they know at one time. Sometimes the best thing said isn't. There are times when your silence is more powerful than too many words. But knowing when to share those stories, knowing which stories to tell, and having rehearsed them and practiced them, the ability to connect with someone else who says, wow, I never thought of it like that, but man, that just hits me right in my heart. I really have to stop and think about it in a new way. That's what every leader needs. That's what every communicator should be about the business of. The ability to tell a quality story that connects with the heart of someone else, that has the ability to persuade their choices. I don't mean manipulation. I mean revelation. I mean raising the awareness of others to see something they've never seen, to hear something they've never heard, to feel something they've never felt. That's the requirement of every leader. Choose your stories well. Tell your stories well. Impact the life of others through the stories that you tell. And the more time you spend building, selecting, crafting, and creating those stories, the more impact you're going to have in the world around you. The more you will lead the narrative. The more your priorities in life will be revealed, and they will determine the priorities of others. I challenge you to take some time to build those stories. If you need some help with that, go to storypowermasterclass.com. It is what I do. It's my calling on this earth. I'm glad, delighted, enthralled to have you a part of what we're doing here to lead the narrative. And if you think your story is already ready, you've already nailed it, you've already got it figured out, drop a video link on leadthenarrative.com. There's a form right there. All you got to do is put your URL in there, fill out a little bit of information, and your video will be right there on the page at leadthenarrative.com. Love to have your voice be a part of changing the narrative in our world today. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time, and I really highly recommend it if you're looking to grow your ministry, grow your business, grow your career. Loren will serve you well.
Thank you.